Welcome to the Infuse Compassion podcast, hosted by me, Amy Quisenberry.
And me, Mark Carpenter.
We are on a mission to make this world a kinder place for us all by bringing healthier human connection to communities, families, and organizations of all types and sizes.
Our goal is to create stronger relationships, more inspired teams, increased trust, and improved results.
So let's get started with more ways to infuse compassion into our world. Welcome back, Compassionators, to another episode of the Infuse Compassion podcast. Oh my goodness, we had an incredible episode. If you haven't watched the episode with Alex and Brandi, dance and therapy and the intersection, please go watch that and then come back, or listen, depending on which platform you're on, and then come back, all right? I'm going to turn it over to Mark. Mark, we talked about so much. Like, what's going through your mind?
Well, there's so much is going through my mind because we went so many different directions. In fact, we went directions that I didn't really think that we were going to go with that. And so we had a really interesting and creative and broad spanning conversation with Alex and Brandi. But before I even get into my thoughts, I think that you should tell our Compassionators how this all came about, how this came to be. Because just so everybody knows, Amy was the one that put this together with Alex and Brandi. And it's kind of a cool story about how it even came to be. So are you okay telling that story?
I would love to. Yeah. So Alex and I are actually friends. And we've known each other for a few years now. And we have such incredible dynamic conversations. Well, with him being a therapist, just imagine, like, you have a friend and they're a therapist. Like, what kind of conversations are you going to get into? It's just amazing. And I said, would you be a guest? And so when we sat down and we started to plan it, he said, there's actually something that I've been playing around in my mind with, and I wanted to run it past you, because we were going to focus on strictly therapy. And I said, absolutely, let's hear it. And he said, I've been noticing things in my dancing, and my dance instructor actually helps me through these patterns that are showing up in my life. And it's actually, I've realized dance is a metaphor for life. And I'd love to come on, but only if Brandi can be there too. And I was like, absolutely, let's do it. And we knew you were coming to town. Mark, by the way, if you haven't noticed, we are together in a studio, so that's exciting. And we said, this is really special. Let's get the four of us in a studio. And so reached out to the Content Factory, and here we are. That's how it happened.
Yeah, and I think that's incredible. And I love the idea about dance being a metaphor for life, because I am not a dancer. I mentioned that on the previous podcast, but I am involved in music a lot, and there's so many different areas that can be metaphors for life that we can learn from. And I think that's the importance of what we just had that discussion around, was what do we learn from that? How can we relate this to us? And relate it in a way, for our topic, to be more compassionate with ourselves, be more compassionate with others, and really strengthen and grow in our relationships, in our businesses, and our teams. And so I just loved taking the analogy, the metaphors, and making those connections into our lives. I'm gonna excuse me, throw it back to you as to what were some of the top points that came out of our discussion with Alex and Brandi that are still kind of resonating inside your brain.
There's so many, but one of them, I'll start with this one, and that is when we set clear expectations to our partner on the dance floor, our partner in life, a manager sets expectations to an employee sets expectations to a manager. What we're doing is we're creating a space so that they feel comfortable to fully show up like that. And Brandi even went so far to talk about, I will only give my partner my hand when I'm ready to give them my hand. And that's not something that's just accidentally. There's a conversation that happens of, hey, listen, this is one of those things that I do. She didn't come out and say that during the episode, but you can tell the way she talks about it that, you know, I think it's like a rule in dance, maybe.
I don't know the rules of dance.
I have to also say that Brandi, Alex, and I Ubered over here. So there's lots of conversations that happened before the podcast that are going in my mind. But I know that that's part of the piece is I'm going to give you my hand when I'm ready to give you my hand, but you know that about me because we've had that clear discussion. So that's one of the things. What about you? Or dig into that.
Yeah, and the one that jumped out to me was that idea of mistakes. And Brandi made this great comment about when you make a mistake, that moment's gone. And you can't live in that moment anymore. And I think about that in life and particularly in business around mistakes happen. You learn from those, but you can't live in that mistake moment. That's not compassionate to yourself. That's not compassionate to others to keep ruminating on and living in that mistake moment. That moment is gone. And so all we can do is move to the next moment and say, all right, that mistake's been made. Now, how can we react to that, learn from that, grow from that, and move on to that next moment, which can be another beautiful moment. It doesn't have to be, well, this one mistake was made and that reflects everything. Everything else is falling apart from here.
And this is really the power of the presence, right? Of living in the present, of really being here and not because in that, if you sit in that moment of regret of what didn't happen, how helpful is that, right? Alex talked about sometimes we go into this shaming cycle and all of this and that. And when he didn't say this, but when I sit and I feel that moment, I feel like we're robbing ourselves of such a gift instead of just being like, I mean, if you've ever seen kids play, when they're really playing and just having fun, you know, the little ones that are maybe playing baseball or on the soccer field, they're just out having a good time, you know? And it's so beautiful to see this innocence and this vibrancy of, we're not counting how many pieces we got right. We're counting, how am I feeling right now?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it just made me think of a couple things around kids and activities like that. I was playing a little baseball game with one of my 7-year-old grandchildren, and I was throwing him this ball, and he would try to hit it. And you know what? He never got upset when he missed the ball. He just picked it up and threw it back to me and let's do it again. Now, it was very much I was trying to throw the ball where his bat was swinging to help him make that hit. But we too often get caught up in those moments of, why am I not better at this? There was a comment, I think it was Brandi that made it too, where she says, we have to go from where we are, not where we thought we would be. And so I think of this 7-year-old who's just doing his best to try to hit this ball, and he's not worrying about, man, I should be like in the major leagues. I should be hitting every single ball that comes my way. He's not worried about where he thinks he should be. He's just where he is. And oftentimes we get caught up in, well, I thought I would be farther along today. I thought I would be farther along in my career, in my life, in my relationship, in my family, whatever it happens to be. And then we're, like you said, not in the moment. And we lose the opportunity to be in that moment and grow from that moment because we're in a hypothetical state, not in our actual state.
And Brandi talked about, be curious, don't be in a judgmental state, right?
Yeah.
And so much of the time, and I know this is something that I used to do, and I've worked really hard to minimize doing this, it's being in a place of can't, won't, shouldn't, don't, right? And when we limit ourselves, when we limit what's possible, what are we robbing? What's the future that we're robbing ourselves of?
Yeah.
You know, if we can't really sit there and be like, well, let me get curious, you know, what kind of gift could we find ourselves in if we just explored this and got a little curious about this, you know?
I remember years ago hearing the expression, just don't should on yourself. You know,
Just don't should. He
should.
said
I said the word should.
I know. I love
because
it.
but it's so applicable. It's like we should on ourselves all the time. We think, well, I should this, I should that, I should this. I had an experience years ago where, and like I mentioned, I play music. I don't dance, but I had a music book of a guy named Jim Brickman, who's a piano player, and he was going to be at a local music store, and I took my music book to have him sign it. You know, so I'd have an autographed copy of some of his music. And when I get to piano books, I tear off the regular binding and get them spiral bound because it's easier to turn. It stands up better on the piano. If you know, you know. And so when I handed it to him to sign, he looked up and he said, "Who plays?" Because he immediately knew that this was not somebody who just listened to it, but actually played the music. And I said, "I do." And I said, "But you know, when I play it, it doesn't sound like when you play it." And I always remember what he said to me. He said, "It shouldn't. You're not supposed to sound like me. You're supposed to sound like you." And I'm giving you the guidelines here in the music, but you need to express yourself in this music. This is not you sounding like me. You should sound like yourself. And I thought that was such a great lesson to learn, that we get caught up sometimes trying to be someone else or something else, somewhere where maybe we are not at that place yet. And we should focus on who am I and what do I want to do and grow from there.
And there's so much self-compassion in that, you know, when everything that you just said, there's so much self-compassion. That takes me to one of the things that I heard Brandi say that I thought was so powerful. Study the hypothetical body instead of the actual body. Yeah. And where my mind went to was, I think it's I don't want to speak for men, I don't want to speak for all women, but in my mind, I think sometimes there can be a comparison of, you know, why don't I look like that? Why can't I do that? Why whatever? And in my mind, I sometimes see this more in women than I do men. And it's when I stop and I step away from that. And I've worked really hard to stop doing the comparison, and I think I've made great progress. And now I compare myself to myself. Am I better today than I was yesterday, right? And I want to stay here for a minute because I'm realizing like this is a lot of work that I've done to get here. That comparison has turned into respect. So when I see somebody who has something that I'm like, wow, look at the way she's showing up. It is respect. It's not me comparing how am I different, but that woman is a badass right there, and that is awesome. And I love to see that and celebrate that, right? But what other areas? Like, I want to hear your thoughts on this, Mark.
Yeah, and I see it a lot in career. Why am I not farther along in my career? Here's a person that's basically the same age as I am, and they're in a higher career status, or they're making more money, or they're doing X, and I'm only doing M. I don't know. And we make that comparison on where we are in our career. Well, maybe that's not where you're supposed to be in your career. And if you want to be in that place, then what are you doing to get there? But we can't. You can't go from where you hope to be. You have to go from where you are, and work from there. That comparison game is always really dangerous, and it doesn't matter what aspect it is. If it's physical comparison, if it's career comparison, if it's money comparison, house comparison, belongings, whatever it happens to be, it's always really dangerous because you are not showing compassion to yourself or to other people when you're doing that, because you're putting a me versus you and us versus them type of mentality in place when you're making that kind of comparison. I love the thought that you had there about, wow, good for that person, respect for that person. And that's such a more healthy way to do it, to say, wow, that is so great that they had this opportunity, that they had this growth. You and I both do public speaking. And very frequently, because we're friends with other public speakers, we will see on LinkedIn, hey, I have this speaking opportunity at such and such place. It's hard sometimes not to go, ugh, jealousy. How come I'm not getting that speaking gig? Or how come I'm not getting that job or getting asked to speak at this place? And I try really hard to fight against that and say, that is so cool. Good for them. And when something opens up for me, they're going to come back and say, good for me.
Yeah.
And that's the abundance mentality that's much more healthy to live in.
It is. It is. Yeah. Alex talked a lot about our experiences that we've had throughout our life as a child that's kind of shaping how we're showing up and how that's showing up in dance. We actually opened the show a little bit with the people pleasing, and this, you made a mistake, so I'm going to try and cover for you because I'm a people pleaser and I want to make sure everything's okay. And I kind of want to hey, all of you compassionators that find yourself as people pleasing, what a gift to be able to sit back and be like, I don't need to fix you. That's not my responsibility. You have your responsibilities and they're you, and I have my responsibilities and they're me. And then we're going to show up together side by side as equals. It's not my job to care or fix you, right?
And the other part that I heard in that is sometimes as people pleasers, we try to anticipate what the other person is going to need. Mm-hmm. And Brandi talked about how in dance, that's dangerous, that you're anticipating where they're going. And she used this phrase, there needs to be an eagerness to respond, but enough patience to follow.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great metaphor, a great phrase to remember in our relationships in life, that we need to have that patience to not just try to anticipate what people need and prefix it to be a people pleaser, but to just be eager to respond when we see what those needs are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This makes me think of the learning component, right? And, that whole learning of, I have expectations that I should be here or I should be there. And it was working with where you are rather than wishing for a different outcome. Did you say that already?
Yeah, I talked about it a little bit, about that hypothetical place where I am versus where I actually am.
Exactly. And that, one of the things that we talked about, I can't remember again if it happened here or in the Uber on the way over, but mistakes aren't failures. Yeah. They're actually invitations to learn, adapt, find creative solutions. So I want to take that to a company perspective, right? The organizations. How many times when we get it wrong, is it really an opportunity to get it right? Even better than we ever imagined.
Yeah, and I think that we miss those opportunities, particularly in leadership roles, when we put the shield up and we think, okay, I got to protect myself from this, so I got to find somebody to blame. There's got to be somebody responsible for this. It's like, let's learn from it. Let's learn from it and move to the next spot. That's what we were talking about earlier in terms of once the mistake has happened, that moment's gone. Mm-hmm. You're not in that moment anymore. And so you're not going to change that moment. All you can change is the future moments.
Yeah.
And along those same lines, there was a statement that one of them made. I'm not sure exactly which one. But they said, it's hard to change bad habits you don't know you have. Mm. I think it was Brandi, because she was talking about showing people on video. Mm-hmm. You see what you're doing here? Oh, I wasn't aware that I was doing that. And I just loved that because, again, from the business standpoint, a lot of times we don't know where we're going wrong. We don't know what bad habits we have that are holding us back. Mm-hmm. And even recording sales conversations, recording presentations that we're doing. I remember early in my career I was doing some public relations training, and they were recording us doing an interview. And I realized throughout the whole interview, I kept licking my lips. And she even turned the sound off to play it back for me. I looked like a lizard. I mean, my tongue was going in and out the whole time. I was like, oh my gosh, I had no idea that I was doing that. But this is where, particularly as leaders, if you can coach your people to help them see, here's some bad habits that are going to help you develop. With the intent, not that I want to be critical, but that I want to help you grow. I want to help you develop and get from where you are to where you could be. But leaving those mistake moments behind, it's all about progressing and growing.
And I want to stay here for a minute because this is a critical conversation opportunity when we talk about whether it's your partner in a relationship or whether it's somebody that you are working with, your manager, an employee. Alex spoke about coming to the conversation. You may have wounds, trauma from your past. That's an accountability point, right? And then the person delivering the message, how are you delivering it, right? We each have a responsibility. One, if you're the recipient, listening to really the message and the care that they're trying to share. And that should be second. The person who's sharing the message, how are you sharing this? When Brandi is talking about sharing the video, she's doing it from a place of love. She's doing it from a place of, look at how amazing you are. And then here's this one thing, here's your opportunity to get even a little bit better, right? And it's such a beautiful, it's a safe place. She's already created a safe place in her dance class. So everybody knows how Brandi's going to show up, right?
And it's a safe place based on that good intent. That if you come into a conversation with good intent and make sure the other person knows you have that good intent, it can be safe to get feedback. I use this analogy all the time. I think of a time that you got really difficult feedback, but you were okay with it. Why were you okay with it? It's very likely because you knew that person had your best interest at heart. There are probably other moments where you got really minor feedback and it felt super annoying. And it's because you felt like the other person maybe didn't have good intent. They were just trying to pick or trying to make themselves look a little better in that situation. And so go into those types of conversations with the intent of I want to help. Now, on the receiving end, that's the other place where you need to take, even when people don't deliver it well, feedback is a gift. I think of the child who comes home from school with this Mother's Day present or Christmas present or birthday present for family members or whatever it happens to be, and it's something they made in their crafts time at school. You're going to look at it and go, that's kind of ugly. That is not great. But you're going to accept it as a gift, even if it doesn't look very good. And so if you can look at feedback as a gift, regardless of how it's wrapped, regardless of how it's packaged, that feedback can be useful for you. And so just considering feedback and having that mindset that feedback is a gift is very helpful. I
have a story that I want to share on this because this is prior to you arriving at the studio. Alex, Brandi, and I were talking, and again, this is the first time Brandi and I have met. Alex and I have known each other, but Alex has only known me for a couple of years, and they had made some comment about, oh, you're so nice, you're so kind, and I said it wasn't always this way, like very abrasive, aggressive, and
What?
I said, yeah.
I've only known you for a year, so I only know the kind Amy too.
Yeah. And I said there was actually a leadership group that I was in. This was probably 2009. And the company that I worked for at the time, they would every year or so for about 3 years, for 3 years, each year, they put a group of about 15 to 20 people across the globe. And they said, we've identified you as future leaders. And we had a camp, an IT camp, an operations camp, an HR and legal camp, and then each camp was in a different part of the world. It was incredible. Canadians, Argentinians, Filipinos. It was so amazing. So in the first camp, it was either the first or second camp, we'd gotten to know each other enough. And the 3 Filipinos came to me. It was actually in front of the whole group. And they said, it was during a feedback session. And they said, Amy, you make us want to shut down. And I went, okay. And I had to hear that.
Yeah.
And they said, we don't feel like we have a voice when you're around. And I went, okay, you know what? Thank you. I needed to hear that. It was so humbling, and it was such a gift. And I still think of these 3 beautiful people who collectively was like, you need to hear this message, because if you want to be a leader in this company, you need to be able to lead people that look like us and our culture, and you're not going to be effective. It was their responsibility to give me that feedback. That was their job as my peers in that leadership group, and I'm so grateful for that. And that's kind of a lesson for us all, you know?
Well, that goes back to that statement. You can't change the habits you don't know you have.
That's right.
And once you knew that, that empowered you to be able to make that change. Mm-hmm. Well, I feel like we've gotten to our point where we've rehashed and gotten our thoughts out about this episode. Again, if you haven't listened to the episode with Alex and Brandi, you need to go back and listen to that and listen to the little gems that they shared with us in that podcast. Final thoughts, Amy?
I'm just so grateful. This was really a special moment. You know, we're early in our podcasting world, and for us to be able to come together, this is only the second time Mark and I have been in the same room together, by the way.
Yeah.
It's been a year since we first met, right?
Which is just unbelievable.
Right. And just so grateful for how this all came together, and always grateful for all of you compassionators. Thank you so much. And keep infusing the compassion into the world, and don't forget to give some to yourself.
Thank you, compassionators. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Infuse Compassion podcast. If you enjoyed the conversation, please share a review and like the podcast so other compassionators can join us. Until next time, let's all do something each day to infuse compassion into the world. For more information on our guests, see the show notes. For more information on Mark and Amy, go to infusecompassion.com.